Hello again. Right, before we start actually animating our name, I just want to give you a quick introduction to animation and how it works in Max. You don't have to do this. You can just watch and then we'll go over it again with your name for actually animating the bits together. So first of all, let's just create an object, good old-fashioned teapot. Now, you know already for moving an object around, you've got the gizmo here, and you can move it in the X, Y, or the Z directions. And you've got a rotate gizmo. You can rotate it in the X axis, the Y axis, or the Z axis. And all of these things are just numbers. So you see down on the status bar here at the moment, it says the rotation, it's telling me the rotation value is 0, 0, 0 because I've rotated it 0 degrees. If I rotate it in the Z axis by about minus 75 degrees, for example, you can see now that down here, my Z-axis has a different value, minus 75 degrees. Now, all we do when we animate is we set these values up at different points on the timeline. So if I was to, let's just undo that. Let's create our first animation. There's two ways of creating animation, auto key and set key. We'll probably use auto key the most, but I will show you set key first. So you click the set key button, and you see that the outside border of your 3ds Max interface goes red. Now we've got the teapot here, we need to select it, and then we're going to hit this big plus button with a key on it, the set key button. You can also press K, and it does the same thing. Now if you look down here on the timeline, you'll see that it's created a little marker down here on the timeline with the red, green and blue line on it. I'll explain what the red, green and blue mean in a minute. Let's go to a different position on the timeline, say 15 frames in. I'm going to rotate the teapot and I'm going to move the teapot to a different location. And then I'm going to hit the set key button again to create another key. And you can see now it's created another key here. So there are two keys. Now these keyframes are basically just numbers that are stored. So if I scrub the time slider back through, you can see now that the teapot goes from one position and one rotation value to the next position and the next rotation value over a certain period of time. Okay. Nothing complicated about it. All it said is at frame 0 it has this position and rotation, and at frame 15 it has this position and rotation, and then it gives you some movement in between to get you there from A to B. Now, if I wanted to reverse this animation, because these are just numbers, I can actually take this keyframe and I could move it over to here. And I could take this keyframe and move it over to here. Let's put this one back on 15. And now it's at this position, which is our second position that we created, but it's at that position and rotation at frame 0, and it will now move forward to the original position and rotation on frame 15. We're actually going to use this technique with our name in a minute. We're going to create it moving away, because we've all got it set up exactly how we like it. We're going to create it moving away, and then we're going to swap the keyframes over so it moves in. Okay. Now the other way of creating animation is using auto key. So instead of set key, if I turn auto key on now, let's go forward to say frame 30, and then I move it. The very act of moving it creates a keyframe. And you can see now that that movement is now built in as part of the animation. So I've got the original one here, which I created with set key, and then I've got this one movement that I created with auto key. And you can see as well that it's done at a red keyframe here in the timeline. That's because red means position. So each one of these has got position because you can see they've each got red. That's red, green and blue. That's red, green and blue. And that one's just red, which means the position is keyframed for each one of them. The rotation is not keyframed here. It's just keeping the same rotation it already had. If I go along to frame 40 and I change the rotation with auto key on, you can see now it creates a green keyframe to say that I've recorded the rotation. Now this is quite interesting because what it means is that if you think about from frame 15 to frame 30 here, it's moved because the move keyframe has gone from that position to this position, and after frame 30 it stays stopped. The rotation, it had a rotation set on frame 15, and now the next rotation is set on frame 40. So what that means is that it's going to start rotating there and it's going to continue rotating there. So if I scrub through this again, there's my initial move, and then the auto key moves that I've just created. It's going to move and rotate to start off with, and then as it gets to the final position, it's not going to move anymore, but it's going to carry on rotating. Okay, so with auto key, the rotation and the movement separate out. If I completely wipe all of those away, let's just get rid of that completely. Go back to the start. So the other thing you need to be aware about with auto key is when I first make an auto key, you see there's no keyframes at all now. If I make that move on frame 15, it actually generates two keyframes. The first one on frame 0 and the second one on frame 15. And what it's doing is, that's where I moved it to, but it's remembered where I moved it from and it's put a keyframe there on frame 0. The same with rotation. So sometimes you need to be a little bit careful. So if I now rotate this, you can see now that it's created a green keyframe on 0 and a green keyframe on frame 23. So again, the rotation is going longer than the movement. So movement is red, rotation is green, the other one is scale. Now I'm going to show you scale, but good CGI people never use the scale tool. So this is here for playing with, but don't ever actually use it. And you'll find out more later, particularly when we look at things like rigging. So if I use the scale gizmo and scale the whole thing up, it now puts a blue keyframe on frame 9, and I also get another blue keyframe on frame 0. So you can see it grows and rotates and moves, then it just rotates and moves, and then it just rotates. So what I would suggest you do is, before we actually start working on our name, is that you actually have a little experiment yourself with this, get used to using set key and auto key, and then we'll come back and we'll do our name. Okay.